My sister helped our parents ruin my face with some sketchy illegal skin lightening cream, so I finally cut ties with all of them for good. 2 years went by, and then out of nowhere, my sister came crawling back, scared out of her mind and begging for help. Honestly, my family is the most racist bunch I've ever had to deal with. Whenever we stepped outside during the summer, my mom would literally count how many times my sister and I left the shade. And once we got back home, each time out in the sun meant a hard slap across the face. That was just part of our routine for years. Every morning, my mom would rub cheap skin whitening cream from the Dollar Tree all over us like it was lotion. The paler we looked, the nicer she treated us. I just remember wishing I could be a regular kid. But my sister? She leaned into it. She was like the queen of being whitewashed. Every single night, she'd set an alarm to go off every couple of hours just to mess up her sleep. The constant exhaustion made her look even paler, naturally. I mean, seriously, what kind of madness is that? And instead of our parents stepping in and saying, "Hey, your health matters more than how light your skin is," they acted like she was some kind of princess. They spoiled her with fancy dresses, expensive jewelry, whatever her heart desired. It became painfully obvious who the favorite child was. And if I wanted even a piece of their love, I figured I'd have to follow her lead. But I kept hoping I could win them over some other way. I busted my butt getting straight A's, kept the house spotless every weekend, and even gave them foot rubs like some kind of servant. And every time, they'd smile and say, "Thanks, honey, but we just wish you put this much effort into being pale and pretty like your sister." When I turned 16, they actually gave me this bleach-based hair product that was shipped straight from Africa. I spent my entire birthday crying into my teddy bear from Barnes & Noble. That's when my sister walked in and hugged me. I honestly thought she was about to say something comforting. Something like, "You'll always be my sister, no matter what color your skin is. That's what counts." But instead she said, "Layla, I love you, and I just want to help." Then she told me to look at her. I stared at her bony frame, the deep eye bags that looked like canyons under her eyes, and the chemical burns across her scalp from all that hair straightening. She said, "If I can be this beautiful, then you can too." I seriously thought it was a joke, but the sparkle in her eyes? That told me she was dead serious. She really believed that doing all that to herself was the right path. So, after that, I started wearing foundation 2 shades too light and always made sure to cover as much of my skin as possible. Not because I hated my brown skin or my natural curls, but because I thought maybe it would finally make my parents proud. I mean, they're the ones who brought me into this world, right? Fast forward 6 years, and I had just graduated from the University of Florida. That Thanksgiving, I was actually feeling really confident. I'd gotten into running and spent a lot of time outside, which helped me start embracing my natural Honduran looks. And honestly, I loved how I looked. Julian, my boyfriend, loved it too, lol. He's half Puerto Rican and half Italian, so he totally got the whole internalized racism thing. But he could pass as white. So I figured maybe, just maybe, things would go okay with my parents. But man, was I wrong. We showed up at my parents' place, hand in hand. I even went the extra mile and used a slightly lighter foundation, thinking it might soften the blow. The moment the door swung open, I saw someone who looked like my sister, but she was a shell of herself. Pale as a ghost, painfully thin, and just broken. My heart sank. And hers must have too. Because the second she saw us, she gasped. "Dios mío, what are you doing to our bloodline?" Julian squeezed my hand tight, like he was trying to tell me, "It's okay, I've got you." Meanwhile, tears were already rolling down my face. "My love, what have you done to yourself?" My mom screamed, reaching for my hair bun like she could fix everything by yanking it loose and straightening it with her fingers. That's when she noticed Julian. Her jaw dropped so wide I thought it might snap right off. She said, You almost had me thinking this monkey was really your boyfriend." Then she laughed. Like, full-on laugh, like she just heard the best joke of her life. My dad grabbed my hand, trying to pull me inside. But this wasn't the same hand I remembered from my childhood. No, this one hurt. I yanked away and shouted, "Don't touch me!" My face was covered in tears. Then, within seconds, I felt my skin start to blister up, peeling like I'd been out in the sun for days. I screamed, and Julian grabbed his phone to call for help. I honestly thought by now my parents would realize how messed up all this was. But no, My dad actually tried to fight Julian, trying to wrestle the phone from him. "Pain is beauty," he said. "Armida will be beautiful." Meanwhile, my face felt like someone had dumped hot sauce on it 100 times over. Thankfully, help arrived. By the time the nurses got to me, my eyebrows had already been burned clean off. The next morning, I woke up from the skin graft surgery to Julian holding my hand and whispering that I was beautiful. But then I looked at my phone. There were dozens of missed calls and texts. The first voicemail was just full of rage, calling me a disgrace to the family. The second one? Downright threatening. By the time I hit the 10th message, it was my sister's voice, practically sobbing, asking me not to press charges. "They're our parents," she said. "They only want what's best for us. Please come back home, we can fix this." I couldn't believe she was still standing up for them after everything they'd done. Her voice sounded hollow, like she'd given up fighting years ago. Julian sat beside me as I listened to every message. With each one, his face got more and more serious. "Layla," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. This isn't normal. What they did to you, that's abuse. It's always been abuse." He held my hand so gently, being careful not to move the floor. I knew he was right. But hearing someone actually say it out loud? That flipped a switch inside me. All these years, I'd been chasing love that should have been unconditional. I let them tear me down, physically and emotionally, thinking that's just how family works. I made excuses for their cruelty, convinced myself it was my fault I wasn't what they wanted. Later that day, the hospital's social worker came in to check on me. She asked about the burns. And for the very first time in my life, I told someone the truth about what my family was really like. I can't say what happened after that, not in this short video. I was still stuck in that hospital bed when I made the call to press charges. The social worker stood by me the whole time, helping me fill out the police report, and I won't lie, I was scared out of my mind. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the pen to sign anything. The cop who took my statement was an older guy, Officer Ramirez. He kept glancing at me with these tired, heavy eyes, like he'd seen way too many cases like mine. "You're doing the right thing," he told me while I tried to explain years of pain and control. I must have almost walked away from that conversation a dozen times. There's this twisted kind of guilt that hits you when you're turning in your own parents, even when they're the ones who literally burned your face with illegal skin bleach. Julian never left my side. He held my hand through every single question and even brought me real food, 'cause let's be honest, hospital food is just plain awful. The nurses started calling him my husband, and neither of us bothered to correct them. Honestly, it felt kind of nice, like I was getting a glimpse of a future where I actually had people who cared. Meanwhile, my phone was blowing up with messages from my parents and Maya. Eventually, I just shut it off. Reading those texts was making my blood pressure spike, something the doctor said could slow down my recovery. My mom kept flipping between threats and begging me to come home. My dad sent these long, dramatic paragraphs about family honor and how I was turning my back on our culture. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. This man who tried to bleach the brown off my skin was now preaching about heritage. But the hardest ones to read were from Maya. "If you go through with this, they're going to take me away," she texted. "Please, Layla, I need them. I don't know how to survive without them." That one hit me like a punch in the gut. Because the sad truth was, I understood exactly how she felt. When your whole sense of self is built around making someone else happy, losing that anchor, no matter how toxic, is terrifying. I was finally discharged 3 days later. My face was still wrapped up like something out of a dollar store horror movie. The doctor said I'd need follow-ups for a few months to make sure the grafts healed right. They also gave me this prescription cream that cost more than my rent. Thank God Julian had insurance that covered most of it. We went straight to his place. I couldn't go back to my apartment, not with the chance my parents might show up. Julian lived in this cramped one-bedroom right near campus, with mismatched chairs and a kitchen so small you had to turn sideways just to get to the sink. But for me, it felt safer than anywhere else I'd ever lived. That first night out of the hospital, I completely broke down. I'm talking full-on, can't breathe, snot everywhere kind of crying. Julian just held me tight and let me let it all out. I kept mumbling about how I should have done something sooner. How maybe I'd failed Maya. How maybe I was just blowing everything out of proportion. Julian didn't interrupt, just wiped my tears away real gently, careful not to mess with the bandages. Around 3 a.m., when neither of us could sleep, I whispered the craziest thing to him. Part of me still wants them to love me. I looked at him. How messed up is that? The next morning, there was a knock at the door. I panicked and bolted to the bedroom, scared out of my mind that my parents had somehow found me. But it wasn't them. It was Officer Ramirez, and he had another officer with him, someone I hadn't met before. When I finally came out, Ramirez looked at me and said, "We spoke with your parents. They're saying the whole thing was just a misunderstanding. That you had some kind of allergic reaction." I just stared at him. Of course they'd say that. They'd been covering their tracks for years with lies like that. The new officer, a woman named Officer Chen, stepped forward and asked if I had any proof. Pictures of past injuries? Reports? Maybe the packaging from the product they used? But I didn't have any of that. I mean, who takes selfies of their trauma as a kid? Who keeps the empty bottle of the thing that burned their face? I felt the panic rising in my throat, like maybe none of this would hold up, and they just walk free again like always. That's when Julian stepped in. The hospital ran a chemical analysis, he told them. It shows exactly what was on her skin. That should prove this wasn't just some beauty cream. Officer Chen nodded, jotting it down in her little notebook. We'll request that report, she said. In the meantime, we've issued a temporary restraining order. Your parents are legally not allowed to contact or approach you. After they left, I turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls from my mom. 12 from my dad. 23 from Maya. The latest text from Maya made my stomach twist into knots. They're telling everyone you're unstable. That you always made up stories to get attention. They've got pictures of you smiling at family parties. They're gonna use that to prove you were never abused. I showed Julian the message, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. They're gonna spin this, I said. Make it look like I'm the crazy one. Julian looked at me and suggested reaching out to anyone who might have seen what I went through. Right away, I thought of Mrs. Patel, our old neighbor. She used to let me hide out in her apartment when things got real bad. And then there was Mr. Thompson, my high school counselor. He once noticed the way I caked makeup over bruises, but I told him I fell, and he didn't press it. So I spent the next few days making calls between doctor appointments and healing. Most folks remembered something strange about my family, but nothing solid enough to help. Mrs. Patel had moved all the way to Arizona. Mr. Thompson vaguely remembered being concerned back then, but he didn't have any records to back it up. I was starting to lose hope when a text popped up from a number I didn't know. This is Jasmine from college, it said. Julian gave me your number. I've got pictures from freshman year, when you still had those chemical burns on your neck from back home. Let me know if they'd help. I'd completely forgotten about those. She took them during a dorm party when my makeup started melting off. I remember being mortified and begging her to delete them. But I guess she never did. I called her right away, and she promised she'd send them over. Meanwhile, Julian was being an absolute rock through it all. Julian had totally rearranged his work hours so he could drive me to my doctor appointments. He was cooking actual meals too, not just microwaved noodles or cereal like I'd been surviving on before. And not once did he complain about how his already cramped apartment now looked like a tornado had hit it thanks to my stuff being everywhere. One night, I caught him hunched over his laptop, reading up on skincare treatments for chemical burn recovery. He thought I was asleep, but I saw him. That moment just about broke me in the best way. About a week after filing the police report, I got a call from this woman named Harper. She said she was a victim advocate with the district attorney's office. Her voice was calm, but direct. We're considering moving forward with charges against your parents, she explained. But we need a bit more information. She said they already had my hospital records and the chemical analysis results. The substance found on your face had hydroquinone levels way over the legal limit, she said, plus mercury compounds, which are banned in U.S. cosmetics. I wasn't shocked. My parents always went out of their way to find the strongest, most extreme products they could get their hands on. They believed if it didn't hurt, it wasn't working. But what did knock the wind out of me was what Harper said next. We also have a statement from your sister. My heart dropped. Maya gave a statement? I asked, barely able to speak. There was a pause. Then Harper said, not exactly in your favor. She's supporting your parents' version of events. According to Harper, Maya had said I was jealous of her bond with our parents, and that I was making everything up for attention. I didn't say another word. I just hung up and hurled my phone across the room. Julian, who'd been tapping away on his laptop, immediately rushed over. I told him what Harper had said, and he pulled me into his arms as I broke down again. I was so emotionally drained, I felt like I had no tears left, and yet, there I was sobbing all over again. "She's scared," Julian said gently. "She still lives with them, right? She's doing what she has to just to get by." I knew deep down he was right, but damn, it still hurt. Maya had lived through all of it. In some ways, she had it worse than me. How could she pretend none of it happened? The next day, I decided to try calling her directly. No texts. Just a voice. To my surprise, she picked up. "Layla, you need to drop this," she said immediately, her voice hushed like she didn't want anyone to hear. "They're furious," she whispered. "Dad broke the coffee table yesterday. I've never seen him like that." I took a slow, deep breath. "Maya, they've hurt us. They're still hurting you." She didn't respond. "Just look at yourself," I said. "When's the last time you ate a full meal? Or slept through the night without waking up scared?" "I'm fine," she snapped. "I'm beautiful. People say so." "You're disappearing," I told her softly. "Every time I see you, there's less and less of you." The line went silent for a long while. I thought she might have hung up. Then she whispered, "I don't know how to be any other way." "Neither did I," I said. "But I'm learning. You can too." She hung up after that. I tried calling her again, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message saying I loved her, and that if she ever needed a place to go, Julian and I would make space for her. Always. Meanwhile, the legal stuff with my parents was dragging on. It felt like a never-ending maze of interviews, forms, and waiting. Eventually, the DA decided to charge them with assault and child endangerment for what happened recently. But when it came to the years of past abuse, that was harder to prove. Harper told me that without hard evidence or witnesses, it'd just be my word against theirs. Julian had an idea. "Start writing it all down," he said. "Every memory. Every incident. Even if it doesn't help the case, it might help you work through it all." So that's what I did. I grabbed this cheap spiral notebook from the campus bookstore and just started pouring it all out onto paper. I wrote about the time my mom slapped me so hard my nose bled, just because I'd played in the sprinklers at a friend's house. I wrote about that awful Christmas where Maya got a gold necklace and I got a bottle of skin-lightening lotion. I wrote about every morning spent getting my hair yanked and straightened while being told how ugly I looked with curls. It felt like I was peeling off a scab with every memory. It stung bad, but I knew the infection had to come out. Some nights I could barely make it through a paragraph. Other nights I filled pages until the ink bled from my tears. Then, about 3 weeks after everything went down at Thanksgiving, I got a call that I never expected. It was Aunt Lila, my mom's sister who lived in Miami. We hadn't been close. She moved when I was little, and I'd only seen her at big family gatherings. "Layla, I just heard what happened," she said, her accent heavier than I remembered. "Your mother called me in tears, saying you're spreading horrible lies about them." My stomach dropped. I figured this was where the extended family would start turning on me. "It's not lies, Tia," I told her. "They've been hurting me and Maya for years." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then she said something that hit me like a freight train. "I know." 2 little words, but they changed everything. "You know?" I asked, stunned. "I suspected," she clarified. "Your mother was always obsessed with how you girls looked. You never played outside. I asked her about it once, and she got so defensive I just let it go." She paused, then said, "I should have done more." I sat down on Julian's couch, my legs shaking under me. "Why now?" I asked. "Because I believe you," she said. "And because I found something." She told me that when she and my mom were young, their own grandmother had done similar things to my mother, bleaching, straightening, making her ashamed of her skin. She wrote about it, Aunt Lila said. "I found her old diaries." Turns out, the cycle didn't start with my mom. It had been passed down, like a curse. That didn't excuse what she'd done to me and Maya, but it did help me understand where some of it came from. Aunt Lila said she'd send me the diaries and would testify if I needed her to. She also offered to let me stay with her in Miami if I ever needed to put more distance between me and my parents. I thanked her but told her I was okay staying with Julian for now. The very next day, I had a follow-up appointment with the dermatologist. She said my face was healing better than expected. The redness had started to fade, and new skin was forming like it should. "There'll be some scarring," she said as she gently checked the grafts. "But it won't be as bad as we thought. You're lucky. It could have been much worse." As Julian and I walked out of the clinic into the parking lot, I spotted someone that stopped me dead in my tracks. Maya was leaning up against a car, and right away I noticed she looked even skinnier than the last time I'd seen her. When she spotted us, she stood up straighter and walked over slowly, like she wasn't sure she should. "What are you doing here?" I asked, caught completely off guard. "I followed Mom when she left for the store," she said quietly. "I saw on the calendar that you had a doctor's appointment today." Julian was just behind me, close enough to be supportive, but keeping enough distance to give us room. Maya gave him a quick, nervous look, then turned her attention back to me. "I've been thinking about what you said," she murmured. "About disappearing." She hesitated, then added, "I looked at myself in the mirror this morning and didn't even recognize who I was." I wanted so badly to hug her, but when I moved, she flinched. "Maya, you don't have to stay trapped," I said gently. "You can get help. You can get out, just like I did." She shook her head fast, panicked. "I can't. They're watching everything now. Dad took my phone. I'm using Mom's while she's inside shopping." She looked around nervously, checking over her shoulder. "I don't have anywhere to go." "You can stay with us," Julian said right away, not even hesitating. "We'll figure it out." Maya stared at him like he was speaking another language. The idea that someone might offer help with no strings attached seemed to throw her off. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "You don't even know me." "You're Layla's sister," he said simply. And somehow for him, that was enough. She looked like she was about to say something else when her phone buzzed. One glance at the screen, and her face went pale. "Mom's done shopping," she said quickly. "I have to go." But before she turned to leave, she reached into her pocket and handed me a small USB drive. "I found this in Dad's office," she whispered. "It's their financial records. They've been buying that skin bleach from overseas for years. Everything's on there, payments, shipping details, the whole thing." I took the drive, stunned. "Maya, this could really help the case." "I know," she said, meeting my eyes. "That's why I took it." Julian reached over and squeezed my hand. "She's tougher than she knows," he said. "We both are," I told him. That night, we plugged the drive into Julian's laptop and went through it. Maya wasn't exaggerating. There were years' worth of transactions showing regular purchases from overseas suppliers in Africa and Asia. Some of the ingredients were terrifying. Mercury compounds. Super-concentrated hydroquinone. Something called clobetasol propionate. A quick Google told us it was a prescription steroid that should never be used long-term on the face. I called Harper right away and told her about the drive. She sounded hopeful, said this kind of proof could really help the case. We made a plan for me to bring it to her office first thing the next morning. Meanwhile, I was a ball of nerves thinking about Maya coming to stay with us. What if our parents had followed her? What if she got cold feet? Julian suggested we get the place ready just in case, and stock up on some food she might actually want. I remembered how she used to love quesadillas before the food restriction stuff got worse, so we got everything we needed to make those. The whole next day went by and still no sign of her. I texted the number she'd used, but no answer. By the time it got dark, I was pacing in the living room, worried sick. "Maybe she couldn't get away," Julian said. "Or maybe she's just scared." We were just about to eat dinner without her when we heard a soft knock on the door. Julian checked the peephole and opened it right away. Maya stood there, clutching a small backpack to her chest, looking pale and shaken. "They know I took the drive," she said as soon as she stepped inside. "Dad was tearing the place apart looking for it. When he couldn't find it, he started screaming at Mom. Thought she had moved it. I left while they were yelling at each other." This time, when I hugged her, she didn't pull away. She felt so fragile in my arms, like I might break her just by holding on too tight. "You're safe now," I told her, even if I wasn't completely sure that was true. Julian got to work making quesadillas while I helped Maya get settled. We didn't have much space, but we cleared out a corner of the living room and set up an air mattress with clean blankets. Maya looked at it like it was something out of a fancy hotel. "I haven't slept more than 2 hours in years," she said, sitting down gently. "Mom always said beautiful people don't need sleep." "Well, you can sleep as much as you want tonight," I told her. "No one's waking you up." We sat down to eat, and I saw her taking these tiny bites, pushing food around her plate like she used to when things got bad. I didn't say anything. I knew this wasn't something that changed overnight. After dinner, she took a shower, and when she came out wearing one of Julian's oversized t-shirts, I noticed fresh bruises on her arms. "Did they hurt you when they found out about the drive?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She looked down at her arm like she hadn't even realized the marks were there. "Dad grabbed me," she said flatly. "He does that when he's mad." Like she was saying it was raining or that the milk had gone bad. I snapped a few photos of the bruises on my phone, more evidence. Then I helped her apply some healing cream to the spots. We sat together on the mattress, both unsure what to say. After a long pause, she whispered, "I'm sorry I told them you were lying. I was scared." "I know," I said gently. "You don't have to say sorry." She drifted off not long after that. Exhaustion finally caught up with her. I tucked an extra blanket around her and slipped into Julian's room. We kept our voices low as we talked about what to do next. Having Maya there changed everything. Now we had to protect her too. The next morning, I called Harper again to fill her in. She thought it might be time for Maya to give her own statement, now that she was safely away from our parents. Maya agreed, though I could tell she was scared out of her mind. "What if they don't believe me either?" she asked in the car. "What if they think I'm just making it all up?" "The bruises help," I told her, hating how true that was. "And the financial records speak volumes." Her interview lasted more than 2 hours. Julian and I sat in the waiting area, barely speaking, just holding each other's hands. When Maya finally walked out, her eyes were red and puffy, but there was something different about her. Like she just set down a heavy weight she didn't even realize she'd been carrying. "They believe me," she said, her voice full of something I hadn't heard from her in a long time, hope. "They're going to press charges for what they did to me too," Maya said quietly. A moment later, Harper stepped out behind her and confirmed it. Maya's statement, along with the financial records, had made the case against our parents a whole lot stronger. They were adding counts of child abuse, endangerment, and assault for both of us. On top of that, there'd be charges for illegally importing banned substances. "We'll be requesting a court date soon," Harper told us. "Both of you will probably need to testify." Just the thought of being in the same room as our parents again, let alone speaking against them in court, made my stomach twist. But I gave her a firm nod. "We'll be ready." That same afternoon, Officer Ramirez called. Our parents had been arrested. They were being held for now, with a bail amount set high enough that they probably couldn't pay it anytime soon. I should have felt relieved. Safer, maybe? But honestly, I just felt numb. Maya, though, she broke down in tears when I told her. Not sad tears, more like something between shock and pure relief. "It's really over?" she kept asking me. "They can't make me go back?" I held her close. "It's really over," I said, hoping she'd believe it. Hoping I could believe it too. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind: legal meetings, therapy appointments that Harper helped line up, and trying to adjust to life in Julian's tiny apartment. It was cramped with the three of us, but we figured it out. Maya slept on the air mattress. I took the couch. Julian stayed in his room and never once complained, even when Maya woke us up from nightmares, or I accidentally used his toothbrush without realizing it. Maya's physical health was fragile. Years of barely eating and never really sleeping had left their mark. We found a doctor who specialized in eating disorders, and she started seeing him twice a week. The first time she finished a full meal without checking calories or staring at her skin afterward, she cried. My own face was healing, slowly but surely. The dermatologist was happy with the progress, but she warned me to stay out of the sun as much as possible. Funny, after all those years of being punished for spending time in the sun, now I had a real medical reason to avoid it. Eventually, our parents did make bail. But the court had ordered them not to contact us in any way. Naturally, they ignored that. New email addresses popped up in our inboxes, and sometimes random people would call and pass along a message. We saved every bit of it. Harper helped us document each violation. She said it only made the case stronger. Christmas rolled around. It was the first one I'd ever spent without our parents. I felt a little sad, sure, but mostly it felt like a breath of fresh air. Julian family invited us to their celebration, and his mom cooked all these amazing Puerto Rican dishes that reminded me of the food Grandma used to make before she passed. Maya ate more that day than I'd seen her eat in years. Then January came, and with it, news: the trial was scheduled for March. The closer we got to it, the more anxious I became. Panic attacks started creeping in, usually late at night. I'd jolt awake, gasping like I was back in that bathroom with chemicals burning into my skin. Julian thought we needed some kind of outlet, so he signed all three of us up for a painting class at the community center. I was awful at it. My trees looked like green blobs, and my sunsets resembled orange juice accidents. But it was fun. And for 2 hours a week, I didn't think about the trial, or our parents, or the scars I saw every morning in the mirror. Maya, on the other hand, was kind of a natural. Her first try at a landscape actually looked like something: mountains that looked like mountains, with a sky that had real depth. The instructor even complimented her work. Her whole face lit up like it had never been allowed to before. "I didn't know I could make something beautiful," she told me later. "I always thought I had to be beautiful." Then February brought something I wasn't expecting. Aunt Lila called. She'd been talking to other family members, and, to my surprise, a few cousins and even another aunt came forward. They shared their own memories of my parents. The pressure to always look perfect, the way we'd flinch if someone raised a hand near us, how we wore long sleeves even when it was hot out. "They're willing to make statements," Aunt Lila told me. "They know they should have said something sooner, but they want to help now." Those new testimonies made our case even stronger. Harper seemed more confident than ever, though she reminded us that trials are unpredictable. As March crept closer, I could see real changes in Maya. She'd gained weight. Her hair was shinier. She still had trouble sleeping, often staying up painting instead of setting alarms like she used to, but she was getting there, little by little. I was healing too. The scars on my face were lighter now, though they'd never vanished completely. I wore my hair natural all the time, curls and all, the ones I used to try to straighten into submission. Julian said they suited me. I was finally starting to believe that. Then, exactly a week before the trial, someone knocked on the door. It was just me and Maya. Julian was at work. When I opened it, I was shocked to see our Aunt Lucia, our dad's sister, standing there. "Your parents sent me," she said right away. "They want to make a deal." Maya moved to shut the door, but Aunt Lucia stuck her foot in before it could close. "Just listen," she said. "They're willing to plead guilty to reduced charges, if you both agree not to testify. They'll cover your medical bills, Layla. And they'll leave you alone. Forever." I looked over at Maya, whose face had gone pale all over again. "We need to talk about it," I told Aunt Lucia. "Come back tomorrow." As soon as she left, we called Harper. She told us not to agree to anything without her there, and said she'd come over that evening to talk through it. When Harper arrived, she explained exactly what this meant. "They're getting nervous," she said. "The evidence is strong. They're trying to cut their losses." "What would happen if we took the deal?" Maya asked. "Would they go to jail at all?" Harper sighed. "Probably not," she admitted. "With reduced charges, they might just get probation, maybe community service. A fine at most." I sat there thinking about all the things our parents had put us through over the years. The pain, the emotional damage, and how they made us feel ashamed of who we were. "That just doesn't feel like enough," I told Harper. She looked at us gently and said, "It's your choice. But you should know, if you do testify, you'll have to face them in court. Their lawyer will try to tear your story apart." She wasn't sugarcoating anything. Testifying could reopen old wounds. That night, Maya and I stayed up late, just talking it through. A part of me wanted to take the deal, skip the courtroom, avoid seeing them again, and just try to move on. But deep down, another part of me needed them to actually face justice for what they did. Around midnight, I turned to Maya and asked, "What do you want to do?" She stayed quiet for a long time before finally saying, "I want them to know they didn't break us. I want to look them in the eyes and tell my story." So when Aunt Lucia came back the next day, we gave her our answer. We weren't backing down. No deal, we were going to testify. That final week leading up to the trial was full of nerves and tension. I barely slept, and even Julian seemed more anxious than usual. Maya coped by throwing herself into her art. She painted these deep, swirling images that somehow matched the chaos I felt inside. The night before the trial, Julian made us a special dinner. He cooked arroz con gandals using his grandmother's recipe, and even picked up a bottle of sparkling cider so we could toast together. When we sat down to eat, he raised his glass and said, "No matter what happens tomorrow, you two are the bravest people I know. And we'll get through it, together." I looked at Maya sitting across from me, and Julian right beside me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time: hope. Whatever came in court, we'd already won something huge. We'd broken the pattern. We'd found our voices. We were finally starting to heal. As we clinked our glasses together, I knew facing our parents in court would be one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But for the first time, I wasn't doing it alone. The morning of the trial showed up with a thunderstorm. Rain pounded the windows while we dressed in the nicest clothes we had. Julian wore a button-down shirt with a tie. I picked a simple blue dress that showed off my real skin tone. Maya wore a yellow sundress that made her look both delicate and strong, all at once. The car ride to the courthouse was quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts. When we pulled into the parking lot, I spotted our parents heading toward the building, huddled together under a big black umbrella. Mom had a hat pulled low over her face, like she didn't want to be seen. Dad walked stiff and straight beside her, his posture tight like he was bracing for something. Julian turned off the engine and asked, "You ready?" I looked at Maya, who gave a small nod. "As ready as we'll ever be," I said. So we walked into that courthouse together, ready to tell the truth, ready to face the past so we could finally move forward. When I stepped into the courtroom, my stomach turned. I seriously thought I might throw up. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to shove them in my pockets to hide it. Julian kept his arm wrapped around my shoulders the entire time, and Maya stayed close on the other side. The room itself was smaller than I expected, not like what you see on TV. Just plain wooden benches, bright fluorescent lights, and a judge's bench at the front. Our parents were already sitting at their table with their lawyer, a slick-looking guy in a pricey suit. Mom had her hair pulled back tight and was wearing more makeup than usual, probably trying to hide how stressed she was. Dad didn't even glance our way. He stared straight ahead, like we weren't even there. Harper met us at our table and went over the last-minute details one more time. "Just tell the truth," she reminded us. "And don't let their lawyers shake you." When the judge walked in, everyone stood. He was an older white man with thick glasses and a serious look. He explained the charges and how the trial would go, but I was so nervous, I barely took in any of it. I just kept looking at my parents, wondering how the people who were supposed to love me could have done all that damage. Mom testified first. She sat there looking all innocent, saying she only ever wanted the best for us. "In our culture, lighter skin opens doors," she said, trying to look sympathetic. "I just wanted them to have every opportunity." Her lawyer asked if she ever meant to hurt us. "Everything I did was out of love," she claimed. "That product that caused Layla's reaction, it was just something new we were trying. I couldn't have known she'd be allergic." But once Harper started her questions, the mask slipped. She brought out the financial records Maya had dug up, years' worth of purchases of banned skin bleaching creams. That's when Mom started to unravel. Her fake calm faded, and she began tripping over her own words. They're just more effective than the American ones," she stammered. "Everyone back in Honduras uses them." Harper didn't let up. "Even though they're filled with mercury and other toxic chemicals?" she asked. And that's when Mom said it, the thing that made the whole room go quiet. "Beauty requires sacrifice," she replied. It was like she finally said what she truly believed out loud. Then Dad got up to testify, and his performance wasn't any better. He tried to play the role of the firm but loving father, saying he only wanted us to have better lives. But when Harper showed the judge photos of my chemical burns and Maya's bruises, he had no real answers. The worst part came when their lawyer turned on me. He brought up all the typical teenage stuff I did, arguing, sneaking out, staying out late, like that somehow proved I was lying about the abuse. "Isn't it true you've always been jealous of your sister's natural beauty?" he asked. I almost laughed. "No," I told him. I've always been jealous that she was willing to destroy herself just to get our parents to love her. And I wasn't. That shut him up fast. Testifying was even harder than I thought it would be. I had to relive every awful memory. Being slapped for going outside, the endless skin bleaching routines, being told our natural features weren't good enough. And with every detail I shared, I saw the judge's expression grow more and more troubled. When I told him about what happened that Thanksgiving, I couldn't hold the tears back anymore. They held me down and smeared some kind of chemical on my face that burned so bad it took my eyebrows clean off and gave me second-degree burns. While I was screaming in pain, they were more worried about stopping my boyfriend from calling an ambulance than helping me. Their lawyer tried to act like I was blowing things out of proportion, but the hospital records and photos proved I wasn't making anything up. Maya's testimony hit even harder than mine. She looked so small and frail up there at first, her voice just a whisper. But the more she spoke about what our parents had done, the steadier she got. She told the court about the nights with no sleep, the times she was starved, and the pressure to look whiter, have straighter hair, and act less Hispanic. I thought that was just how parents were, she said. I honestly believed that's what love looked like. It wasn't until I saw Layla starting to heal after she got away that I realized everything they did to us was messed up. When Maya talked about how our dad had grabbed her so hard he left bruises after she found those hidden financial records, I caught a glimpse of Mom flinching. Maybe she didn't know he'd done that. Or maybe she was just worried how bad it would look to the judge. The whole trial dragged on for 3 long days. By the end, I felt like I'd been wrung out and left to dry. Julian took time off work to be there with us the entire time, and honestly, I don't think I could have done it without him. He brought us snacks during breaks, squeezed my hand when I started to fall apart, and kept reminding me why we were doing this in the first place. On the last day, we sat through the closing arguments. The defense tried to paint our parents as confused immigrants who just wanted us to fit into American life. Maybe their methods were wrong, he said, but they meant well. Harper didn't sugarcoat anything. This isn't about culture, she told the judge. It's about abuse, clear, intentional, and damaging abuse. She laid it all out. How they brought in illegal, toxic skin and hair products, punished us for how we naturally looked, and made us feel like our worth was tied to how white we could pass for. Then she showed the pictures of my burns one more time. This isn't love, she said. It's abuse, plain and simple. When the judge said he was ready to read the verdict, I gripped Maya's hand so tight, I'd probably cut off her blood flow. Julian wrapped an arm around both of us, holding us together. In the matter of State versus Mendez, the judge said, I find the defendants guilty on all charges. I broke down crying, this time from relief. Maya was sobbing too, her whole body shaking. Julian held on to both of us, his own eyes shiny with tears he wouldn't admit to. The judge gave our parents 3 years in prison, with parole possible after 18 months. They'd have to serve 5 years probation after that and cover all our medical costs. They also had to go through court-ordered counseling. A restraining order would stay in place so they couldn't contact us unless we said it was okay. As the bailiff led them out, my mom turned back for a second. There was something in her eyes, maybe regret, but then she turned away, her back stiff and unreadable. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. The case had caught local media attention because the kind of abuse we went through wasn't something most people had heard of. Harper helped us slip past the crowd without giving a statement. We weren't ready to tell our story to the world just yet. That night, we had a quiet little celebration at Julian's apartment. Nothing big, just some pizza and ice cream, but it felt huge. Maya ate an entire slice without once worrying about calories or how she looked. I wore my natural curls loose and a tank top that showed my brown skin. They were little things, sure, but they meant the world to us. What do we do now? Maya asked as we lounged in the living room. Whatever we want, I told her. The months that followed were all about adjusting. The trial was behind us, but now we had to figure out what our life would look like moving forward. Julian's place was too small for all 3 of us, so we started apartment hunting. Maya picked up a part-time job at an art supply store, and I could see how much it helped her feel like herself again. I put my focus back on finishing my last semester of college. We both stuck with therapy. Some days were still tough. I'd wake up sweating from nightmares about Thanksgiving, and Maya still wrestled with her self-image and eating habits. But we were taking steps in the right direction. A surprising blessing came from Aunt Lila. She flew in from Miami a few times and even offered to help us with money if we needed it. I should have done more when you were kids, she said. Let me help now. With her support and the money we'd saved, we found a small 2-bedroom apartment not too far from campus. Julian helped us move in, though he didn't move with us. You girls need your own space, he said, but he stayed over often enough that it felt like home for him too. About 6 months after the trial, a letter arrived, from my mom. Her prison counselor had reviewed it, and included a note saying this might be part of her rehab process, but we weren't required to respond. I stared at the envelope for 3 days before opening it. Inside was a single page, filled with her familiar neat handwriting. Layla, it started. I want to say I'm sorry. The counselor here is helping me realize what I did to you and Maya was wrong. I was raised the same way by my grandmother, but that doesn't make it right. I hope you can forgive me someday, but I understand if you can't. The rest of it followed the same rhythm, apologies wrapped in explanations that kind of sounded like excuses. I passed the letter to Maya, who read it quietly and then handed it back to me. Do you believe her? She asked. I shrugged. I'm not sure. Maybe she's starting to understand. Or maybe she's just saying what the counselor told her to. Are you going to write back? I thought long and hard before answering. Not yet, I said. Maybe one day. But not now. Maya nodded. Same here. We never heard a word from our dad. Aunt Lila visited them in prison once, and told us he was still angry, and didn't think he'd done anything wrong. He said it was my fault, that I'd turned Maya against them and torn the family apart. I can't say I was shocked, but hearing it still stung. Either way, life kept moving. I ended up getting my degree in psychology, partly driven by everything I'd been through and wanting to help people dealing with their own family trauma. Maya enrolled at the local community college and started studying art therapy. She was still a little delicate at times, but I could see her growing stronger with each passing day. Things got more serious between me and Julian. On my birthday, almost a year to the day after everything that went down at Thanksgiving, he popped the question. It wasn't anything extravagant. Just the two of us walking through the campus botanical gardens when he turned to me and asked. I didn't even hesitate, I said yes right away. We both agreed to take our time and planned a long engagement, so we could focus on getting our careers off the ground first. About 2 years after the trial, our parents got out on parole. Harper was the one who called us with the update. She reassured us that the restraining order was still in place, and that their parole officer was fully aware of the situation. Even so, I had a full-blown panic attack that night. I couldn't shake the fear that they might just show up at our door, order or not. Julian ended up staying the night, crashing on the couch just to help us feel a little safer. But they never came. According to Aunt Lila, they'd moved to another part of the state. Over the years, my mom sent a few more letters. Each one seemed a little more thoughtful than the last. Eventually, I wrote her back, just once. It was a short note telling her I was okay, but that I wasn't ready for a real conversation yet. Maya, on the other hand, never replied to any of the letters. 3 years after the trial, Julian and I got married in a quiet ceremony at a park nearby. Maya stood by my side as my maid of honor. She looked radiant, healthy and glowing in a dress that really suited her skin tone. Aunt Lila came all the way from Miami and brought a few cousins who had helped us with their testimonies during the case. Julian's big, loud family welcomed us like we were their own. His mom treated me and Maya like the daughters she never had. We didn't invite our parents. I thought about it, actually spent a few therapy sessions talking it over, but in the end, I just wasn't ready to see them in person. Maybe someday. Just not then. That wedding was everything I used to dream about when I was a little girl. Not because it was some extravagant affair, but because I was surrounded by people who truly loved me, not for how I looked, but for who I was. I wore my natural curls, dressed up with tiny white flowers. I kept my makeup simple, just enough to let my natural skin shine through. The scars from the chemical burns were still visible if you looked closely, but I didn't bother trying to cover them up. They were a part of me. Part of my story. At the reception, Maya caught the bouquet, and her face turned red when Julian's cousin Victor immediately asked her to dance. They'd been dancing around each other for months, both too shy to make a move. It was nice seeing her open up to the idea of love. She'd been so focused on healing that dating hadn't even been on her radar since we left our parents' house. As Julian and I danced together for the first time as husband and wife, I looked around at this life we'd built. It wasn't some fairy tale. We still had our share of hard days and rough patches. But it was honest, it was ours, and it was real. "What's going through that head of yours?" Julian asked, catching the look on my face. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," I told him. 3 years ago, I was lying in a hospital bed with chemical burns, and Maya was practically starving herself trying to meet our parents' expectations. And look at us now. He smiled and gave me a gentle spin. "You're the strongest person I know, you know that?" I laughed a little. "I sure don't feel strong most days." "That's exactly why you are," he said. "You keep going anyway." After the wedding, things settled into a nice rhythm. Julian and I bought a small house with a yard big enough for a garden. I loved digging in the dirt, soaking up the sun without having to worry about punishment or judgment. Maya got her own place near the college where she was now teaching art. She kept up with therapy and was still working on her relationship with food and her body, but she was thriving in ways I never imagined she could. On the 5th anniversary of that awful Thanksgiving, I got another letter from my mom. This one stood out from the others. There were no justifications, no explanations trying to downplay what they did. Just an honest acknowledgement of the pain they caused and a simple request. "If you ever feel ready, I'd like to see you and Maya again. On your terms, wherever you feel safe." I understand if the answer is no. I brought the letter to our weekly sister dinner and handed it to Maya. She read it slowly, her face hard to read. "What do you think?" I asked. She let out a sigh. "I'm not sure. Part of me never wants to see them again." "And the other part?" I asked gently. "Wants some kind of closure," she admitted, giving me a small nod. We spent the next few weeks talking it over. With each other, and in therapy. In the end, we decided to meet our mom. Just her, not our dad. And only in a public place, with Julian there for backup. We picked a coffee shop near our therapist's office, figuring we might need a session afterward. The day of the meeting, I was so anxious I could barely function. My hands were shaking too much to drive, so Julian took the wheel. Maya sat quietly beside me, looking pale but determined. Our mom was already there when we walked in, sitting alone at a corner table, clutching a mug. She looked older. There were gray streaks in her hair she hadn't dyed. When she saw us, she stood, but didn't come closer, respecting the boundaries we'd set in our email. "Thank you for coming," she said as we slid into the seats across from her. Julian sat at the end of the table, not hovering, but close enough to remind us we weren't alone. The conversation started off awkward. Making small talk felt pointless, but diving straight into everything that had happened seemed too heavy right away. After a while, our mom took a deep breath and finally said what had to be said. "I understand now just how wrong I was," she said quietly. "The counseling in prison, and after, it helped me face what I did. What your father and I did. There's no excuse." Maya stared down at her coffee. "Why did you do it?" she asked softly. "Why did you hate how we looked so much?" Tears welled up in our mom's eyes. "I didn't hate you. I hated myself. My grandmother did the same thing to me, and I thought I was helping you avoid the pain I felt. But I ended up passing that pain on to you instead." We sat there for almost 2 hours, talking. It wasn't some magical moment. It didn't fix everything. But it was a start. There were definitely some uncomfortable pauses, and a few moments when things got so emotional we had to stop and just breathe. But for the first time, it felt like we were having a real conversation, one that was raw, honest, and completely unlike anything we'd ever experienced in our family before. Right before we left, our mom asked if we might be open to meeting again sometime. "No pressure," she added quickly, almost nervously. "And I totally understand if you'd rather not include your father. He's still working through some things." Maya and I glanced at each other. "Maybe," I told her. "We'll think about it." As we walked back to the car, Julian turned to us. "How are you both feeling?" he asked gently. "Weird," Maya said, shrugging. I'm glad we went. But at the same time, I kinda want to go home and cry for 6 straight hours." "Yeah, same," I said, managing a tired smile. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully forgive her, but I think I understand her a little more now." A few months later, we saw her again. Then again after that. It didn't happen all at once, and it wasn't easy, but over time, we started to build something new. Not some idealized mother-daughter connection we never really had. But something real. Something based on truth and mutual respect. She never once asked us to meet with our father, and we never brought it up. Life kept moving forward, like it always does. Julian and I had our first child, a little girl. We named her Lila, after the aunt who had been the first one in the family to truly believe us. Maya became the most devoted aunt in the world. She spoiled Lila with handmade stuffed animals, tiny painted canvases, and nursery decorations that looked straight out of a boutique catalog. The day my mom met Lila for the first time marked another turning point for me. I watched her like a hawk as she held my daughter, waiting, searching for any trace of judgment, any sign of the old behaviors she used to direct at us. But there was none of that. She just smiled softly and cooed, telling Lila how perfect she was, just as she is. She is, I said quietly, as I gently took Lila back into my arms. And she always will be. No matter what she looks like. My mom looked at me and gave a slow, understanding nod. Yes, she said. She will be. 7 years after that nightmare of a Thanksgiving, Maya married Victor in a beautiful ceremony by the beach. She wore a sleeveless dress that showed off her natural skin tone with pride, and her hair flowed down in soft curls. She looked radiant, strong, joyful, and completely at peace with herself. It was such a contrast to the girl she used to be, hollow-eyed, hungry, and exhausted from trying to be someone she wasn't. Later that evening, during the reception, I pulled her aside for a quiet moment away from the music and chatter. Did you ever think we'd make it here? I asked, motioning around at everything, the laughter, the family, the lives we'd managed to build. She smiled at me. Not just a polite smile, but a real one that lit up her whole face. Never, she said. There was a time I honestly thought I'd spend my whole life trying to disappear. And now? I asked. Now I'm trying to take up space, she said. The right kind of space. I leaned in and hugged her, careful not to mess up her hair. Well, I think you're doing a pretty amazing job of it. As we made our way back to the party, I spotted Julian dancing with our daughter. She was standing on his shoes, holding onto his hands while he twirled her gently around the floor. My heart swelled so much it almost hurt. Our journey wasn't over. We still had scars, both the ones you could see and the ones buried deeper. We still had tough days when the past snuck up on us out of nowhere and hit like a punch to the gut. But we had something now that we never got from our parents, real love without conditions, the kind that lets you be fully yourself and still feel safe. We'd created a family built on acceptance, trust, and truth. And that, more than anything, felt like a win.